Hello, today we are going to talk about the role of state government. This will be the last video for this unit. So, looking at the legislative powers and the structure of uh, the state legislative branches, um, they're going to derive their powers from state constitutions. Typically, most are organized like Congress. They're in the shape of a bicameral legislature with an upper house that is called the Senate. Usually, the lower house is called the House of Representatives or something of that nature. Nebraska would be the only exception in which there's a unicameral legislature, and the states vary in terms of who presides over the Senate. Legislative sessions at the state level are regular in terms of they're either annual or biennial, but typically most are going to meet every year. And then there'll also be special sessions that are called to deal with issues that arise that might be more of an emergency session. In terms of qualifications, most states require that you live in the district you represent. Senators must be 25. The lower house members must be at least 21. Typically, most legislators are lawyers. Other industries that you'll find legislators often include real estate and insurance as well. So you can see at the state level, the requirements aren't as, or the age requirements aren't as strict as they would be, or you don't have to be as old at the state level as you would the national level. Elections are held just like they are at the national level. So you have primary elections. You have what's called a blanket primary. Basically, it's a primary election in which all candidates are placed on the same ballot, regardless of their party. That would, and examples of those would be California, Louisiana, and Washington, just to name a few. You also have campaign financing. So just to give you an idea of how much was spent on state elections, some candidates spend a lot of money, others spend hardly any. But in 2012, just looking at state Senate races, there was $1 billion spent on those races. And now that was over 7,000 separate elections, but the fact that $1 billion was spent kind of gives you an idea of the amount of money that was put into these campaigns. And looking at laws being passed, a bill can be introduced to in either house. It then goes to the appropriate committee, similar to the national government. Legislators will look to the public and their staff for advice on certain issues. And similar to the national government, not a lot of bills become laws. You can see this is kind of a recurring theme in terms of what you'll see in state governments and how it kind of looks compared to the national government. And looking at local government, it's going to be divided into counties, townships, municipalities, or cities, and special districts. So your counties are going to be the largest political subdivision. So think Delaware County. Typically, those will be governed by a county board, and they decide things like budgets, taxes, zoning codes, local roadways, and things like that. Cities and municipalities, think of Columbus. Municipality is an urban unit of government chartered by a state. They're directed by city councils, which are usually selected to 4-year terms. They can pass various city ordinances or local laws. Then you also have townships. So think of Orange Township, Berlin Township, and they can be proposed by either states or counties, and they serve various purposes from state to state in terms of maintaining roads, whether it's winter conditions and salting the roads, or maybe it's a water pipeline or the water supply, things like that are what government at the township and the local level will look like. You also have special districts. So think of school districts. Okay, these special districts are going to provide um, special services, but they're also going to require taxes. And if you look at school districts, think they're governed by a school board. They set school policies. They require taxes to be run, um, which is why we have levies in our district. It seems like every, I don't know, 5, 6 years. Um, so yeah, and looking at public policy, uh, the state will really focus on like voting laws, the environment, education, public safety, as well as our corrections facilities. Local government is going to focus on how land is being used, different zoning requirements. They're going to focus on transportation, economic development. They might focus on a mass transit system. So maybe the state of New York or the city of New York would focus on the subway. Um, Columbus would focus on busing in CODA. And looking at the state executive branch, we don't have a president, we have a governor, where we have gubernatorial races or elections, which is just a governor race. That dates back to the Latin word gubernare, meaning of or relating to the governor. Most states have a second in command called the lieutenant general. The role of the governor is he's head of the party, or he or she is head of the party. They're also head of the state. They're the chief executive. They're the legislative leader. So you can see they really have a lot of the same roles as the president, just at the state level. One thing that the governor has that the president does not is what we call the line item veto. So the government or the governor gets a bill and he reads the bill or she reads the bill and they decide that they like 95% of the bill. They just don't like one aspect of it. They can veto that one aspect without vetoing the entire bill. So here are different forms of local government. You can see we've got the commission form where you have the voters who elect a board of commissioners who then pass different ordinances, and they elect a police commissioner, a fire commissioner, parks, finance, public works, who will then carry out the policies. And the council manager form, you're going to have the voters who elect a city council, who then elect a mayor. They're the ones responsible for making policies as well. They'll hire someone who manages the city, who then appoints different department heads of the city to carry out the various policies. The last form is the mayor council form. So the voters are going to elect not only the mayor, but the city council. The mayor, his actions or her actions are going to be approved by the city council. They'll also appoint various department heads, and by that I mean the mayor will carry out or appoint various department heads who then will carry out policy. Looking at qualifications of those state and local executives. Most states, in order to be governor, you need to be 30 years old. You need to be a state resident for 5 years and an American citizen. The citizenship and residency requirements differ among the states, and most governors in the past have served in state or local government. Looking at mayors or city managers, your minimum age is going to be 18 to 25 years old, depending on where you're at. Mayors typically are going to be required to live in the town or city that they represent for at least a year, which makes sense. You don't want the mayor of Toledo running Cincinnati or the mayor of New York running Columbus. It just makes sense to live where you represent. In terms of the term length, they're going to serve, most are going to serve 4-year terms and have a 2-term limit. And looking at elections, usually you have 2 steps. Someone must gain the nomination from a major party and then run in a general election, and you need to win the popular vote within that state. Impeachment does exist at the state and local level. except for in Oregon. Okay, some states have the ability to recall, which is where an official can be removed from office by popular vote. So instead of waiting out the term, if an official isn't doing as the constituents want or is going back on their campaign promises, they can be removed from office. Um, Typically, looking at the executive branch and different policy areas, you're really going to have a wide variety of focuses. You're going to focus on public safety, education, health, welfare, business, labor, and all of these are going to have different branches and different agencies that are created to help operate this on a smooth level. You also have land use, infrastructure, the environment. That could include anything from housing discrimination to water supply to sewage and sanitation. And looking at the state and local courts, each state is going to have its own jurisdiction. Typically, you have three types of courts. You have minor courts, general trial courts, which those would be like county and district courts or the Court of Common Pleas. And you also have state appeals courts. You also, within that, have specialized courts like traffic court or a juvenile court, things like that. To give you an idea of how many state judges there are in the U.S., there are 30,000 who are selected by popular election. Some are elected by the legislature, some are appointed by the governor. Some states have a combination of the three, but they will all serve a limited term. And each state also has a Supreme Court. So I know that was a ton of information, but that gives you an idea of kind of how government operates at the state and local level.